right, Jeremy Fowler is here, Floridian, senior NFL reporter, insider, writer, everything. He does it all. We were on an episode of NFL Live 2 weeks ago together that got canceled because Florida State scored 24 runs against UConn. Never seen that before. What's going
It was
on,
the
buddy?
greatest episode never heard. They'll never
I
know
really feel
all
like
the
we
nuggets
were
we
ready
have.
to uncork. It was really like a lost episode.
It's got to be in the file somewhere. But yes, there's gold stuff in there that
Gold
nobody will ever
stuff,
know.
me, you, Hannah Storm, Mina Kimes. We were ready to rock.
No doubt.
All right. So what we're doing here, I think we did this last year on my Spotify show, actually. We're just gonna gossip, man. We're just gonna have some fun over what's going on because it's silly season.
Let's do it.
Nobody's
We'll make stuff
practicing
up.
till July 23rd. You'll make stuff up. I'll just nod
Yeah, I'll
along
make
and
it
then
up.
I'll clip it for Twitter and let you take the heat. That's not I don't do that. I don't do that. It's other guys. So I'm a very careful clip manager, just so everybody knows. Very careful. So there's just so much now. And one thing, the NFL will never become the NBA in the sense that the transactions are more scintillating than the action in some cases, where it's like, oh, what could Kevin Durant do this summer? What's Donovan Mitchell going to do this summer? That's like talked about in the middle of the finals, which we just
Right.
don't do in the NFL.
Right.
But we're starting to get to that point where you think about Dak reaching free agency. You think about some
Yep.
of these other contracts. I mean, frankly, we've always joked that the Cowboys are a stimulus check to the industry. What's a stimulus check to the industry is the Cowboys never signing guys early because you always leave it to the last second, whether that's Dak the last time,
Yep.
whether that's CD Lamb. The media industry said, thank God that Steven and Jerry Jones don't handle their business to get a month of content out of it.
It
I'm
gives
going
us
to
all
start
summer
here.
to talk about.
Thank God. You're going to be cooking on SportsCenter for the next 6 weeks with Dak Prescott updates, but I want to get into the weeds on it. Are people in the league surprised it's gotten this far? Or is it a situation where Dak really wants to? And I've always said the moment someone reaches true free agency as a superstar quarterback, because we've always said, like, Kirk Cousins is the only one who did it.
Yeah.
And he's fine. He was great. He was really good. But he wasn't Dak Prescott.
Right.
He wasn't some of these other guys. I mean, Tua is a different case. But once that happens, the entire salary structure of football changes. If Patrick Mahomes is like, I'm not signing if 5 years ago he was like, I'm not signing a damn piece of paper you put in front of me, I'm reaching free agency, the entire economy of football would change. I think if Dak actually wants to push that, he can. Let's see if he does. How does the league view this, Jeremy Fowler?
Yeah, so I think he's prepared to do that if forced, right? Like the Cowboys have made clear privately that, hey, Dak's our guy. We want him here long term. We're going to try to do another extension. Their actions so far have been described to me as passive. So if they don't get something done in the next couple months, then it's like, I think he is prepared to play out the season, go to free agency. I don't think he wants to do that, but he is certainly prepared. And there's probably some intrigue there about what kind of damage you could do. Like take a team like the Raiders right now that have, a couple different quarterbacks that can probably get it done and win you some games, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, but you don't have that long-term solution. And if Dak's a free agent, this is a bona fide top 10 quarterback. However you feel about Dak Prescott, people inside the league believe that he's a top 10 quarterback. They don't believe that about Kirk Cousins. Very good, but fringe probably top 10. So this would be the first time in however long I can remember that you would have somebody with considerable leverage, unprecedented maybe, on the open market, with, say, 5 or 6 teams really needing one. That's always the key, though. You never know. We always assume that there are like 10 teams that just need a quarterback, but Kirk Cousins was available, and there are really only 2 teams that were in on it. It was Atlanta.
Well, one of them reached out kind of early.
They did. So like the supply and demand still needs to shake out. We still need to see that, but I would imagine that with Dak's precedent and what he can do to change a franchise, that it would be considerable money. I would think that the $60 million number, the $60 million a year number that's been floated around, would be on the table.
I think that's low.
It might be.
I think you're looking at 70.
Yeah.
I think because remember, Kirk Cousins, who, as you just said, was not considered a top 10 quarterback. So I view quarterbacks on a sliding scale. Kirk Cousins can win you a Super Bowl if everything else goes right. Everything else goes right. And if you look kind of like the Electoral College, where it's like, well, if they lose Wisconsin, like if you got Kirk Cousins, like this XYZ have to happen. Dak Prescott can pull a franchise to a Super Bowl in the right scenario. So here's my question: I've said on the show the only thing saving the Cowboys from just straight up losing him and being out of the bidding like really quickly, like on the first day of free agency, if it gets there,
Yeah.
is there aren't a ton of logical options. There are not, because a lot of the teams that have been desperate over the last 2 years have been in a situation where they've overpaid or committed in some way. Now, a couple of things, like you mentioned the Raiders. I don't think the Raiders situation is going to get any better. Are there? We went through it with Jory a couple weeks ago, but like you have some dark horses where it's like wait and see. What if Bryce Young just can't play this year? What
Yeah.
if he just can't play
Yeah.
and David Tepper says, "Screw it, I've changed hedge funds. I can change the
Right.
NFL." Are there teams in your mind that you think are kind of licking their chops?
I mean, there's yeah, for sure. Like I'm thinking of Pittsburgh, right? Like Russell Wilson, he might play great, but he's on a 1 year, $1 million minimum deal, right? And Justin Fields doesn't have his 5th year option picked up. Maybe he's a long term answer. Um, Denver. I mean, they drafted Bo Nix. We still need to see it.
Yeah.
And I could go through I probably look at the list of NFL teams, but there are probably at least 8 to 10 that I think would be heavily involved. Like Dallas is that team. I still think they'll rally and get this done,
Mm.
but it's like they're the situation where your wife says, "Hey, the flights are on discount. We should go book flights to go to the Bahamas." And you're like, "Well, I don't
Right.
really want to spend the extra money." And then 2 months later, you're like, "Well, I want to go to the Bahamas, but now the tickets are they're twice the
Right.
amount." Right? Like you just wait, and the market gets ahead of you. I mean, with Trevor Lawrence making $55 million a year now, and he's really debatable on a top 10 quarterback scale. Tua, same thing. He might match that because
Yeah.
I think the Dolphins probably will be resigned to the fate that like, okay, he led the league in passing. He showed he's durable. We got to get this done. So teams are making that analysis. Most are deciding that their threshold for paying a quarterback is pretty high. So if Dak's ahead of those guys, I don't know that he would hit the $70 million mark, but I think he would hit a huge number, but the structure and the guarantees would be crazy. Like he would have that sort of Kirk Cousins considerable leverage at a higher number. So maybe it is 60 million a year, but it's like ironclad guarantees where there's not a lot of wiggle room for
Sure.
him to be able to get out of his deal if he performs poorly or gets hurt.
I just think there's no way a true free agent top 10 quarterback only moves the market $5 million a year. That's just my feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe NFL owners, we've seen this before. Maybe they just say, you know what, just
Yeah.
for the good of the sport, we're just not going to do it. Not good of the sport. Good of the health of the salary cap. Like that's not good of the sport. I'm being facetious when I say good of the sport. Like it's how
Yeah.
the owners view the sport. The players don't view it like that. But I'm saying we've seen this
Well,
before. Where
yeah.
got Lamar Jackson was available, and teams like, whoa, what you want us to bid on Lamar Jackson? Well, he won the MVP. Um,
Yeah.
I am currently in a wait. The prices will go down thing for Pearl Jam at Madison Square Garden in September because it's a
It's
day
not,
before the NFL season starts. And I didn't buy tickets. I'm like, I don't know what's going on that week, travel, shows, all that stuff. So I'm gonna wait. Tickets are like unbelievable amounts of money.
yeah.
And I'm like, well, they'll
It's
go
not going
down.
down.
They're not going down. They're not going down. And every day I'm like, well, I'll check. Maybe they'll go down. I'm Stephen Jones. That's me. All right, you mentioned the
And
50
here, this
million.
is why teams
Sorry.
wanted, this is why teams wanted a salary cap
Yeah.
specific for one player. Like they wanted this at the last CBA for this very reason. I think they saw this coming. Quarterbacks are making obscene numbers and they're trying to manage it. And it's hard to manage. Like it's easy for players and agents to say, well, the cap went up $30 million. You got to deal with it. But, these teams are faced with the hard reality of like, you got Micah Parsons, you got to pay. Micah Parsons might be their best player, better than Dak and CeeDee Lamb, but they're probably going to make him wait because they got to handle CeeDee Lamb and Dak. It's just fascinating from a team building standpoint where you're going to have these 3 stars paid and you're going to have like vet minimum players around them because you just have no choice.
I will not be going to that Pearl Jam concert, and the Cowboys will not retain all
You
of
can
these
stream it.
guys. I can stream it. The Cowboys can stream Dak Prescott playing for $70 million. By the way, and the thing that will change everything once listen, it's all hypothetical. The Dak contract could come down tomorrow if the Cowboys stop being passive, as you said. But the one thing I just saw a report that Matthew Stafford's looking for more money because of all the adjustments in the league.
Yeah.
And the moment that Dak contract is signed, every single
Yeah.
quarterback is going to start the clock on. I don't need $2 million. I need 10 million extra dollars. And there's a handful of guys who can get that leverage. So that's the thing to watch for me. You mentioned the $50 million club on Twitter the other day. Small but mighty group.
Yeah.
Literally, they are all very good. Trevor Lawrence to me, I don't know. I don't want to do Trevor Lawrence discourse again. I've done it before. I've done it on a
Yeah.
million shows. I'm not doing it. I would not have given him that contract right now. Whatever. Who cares? I'm not running the team. That's just every comparison I make. It's like Manhattan real estate. Price is always going up.
Yeah.
A lot of times and very 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 few investments are actually kill you. So anyway, who's next on that rung? I mean, like obviously Tua is probably going to get close to there sort of soon, but like what's the kind of the next wave of those upper echelon guys?
Yeah, so Tua, I would say if I had to call somebody next, it might be him just because it seems like the path of least resistance. Like they wanted him to prove he could be healthy, and he did. And he not only played 17 games, but led the league in passing. So, however you feel about him, he has answered the bell there. And they've been pretty committed. I mean, they spent 4 years supporting him, and Mike McDaniel loves him, believes he can win big with him. You're committed to Mike McDaniel. So, and they were frugal this whole offseason. I mean, you saw their moves. They signed a lot of players that have been cut elsewhere or are older and don't command top dollar anymore. I think they did that because they kind of need to reallocate their draft picks again and replenish, but they also need to pay this guy. So I think it will happen. It's just it started slowly, but my sense is it will perk up this summer, and I do expect it to get done at some point. And then you got Jordan Love, where that's a
Mm,
fascinating case study because really got hot for the second half of the year, but there's just not a big sample size. But he has that cachet of like you see him and watch him and feel him and realize like wow, he's got some special ability.
mm-hmm,
You just don't have enough of a sample size to say blindly we're going to write you a check. But I think the GM there, Brian Gutekunst, is faced with probably a little bit of pressure, whether he knows it or
yeah.
not, because the Aaron Rodgers situation was not clean for years and it got nasty. And it's like, now this is your guy. You should probably clean it up in a nice and tidy way and get it done. So that I think by the end of the summer we could have 9 guys making 50 million or more.
I first of all, Jordan Love should not take less than Trevor Lawrence. The highs that
And Tua
listen,
shouldn't either.
whatever. I think they're about the same,
Yeah,
but I'm not gonna freak out if one guy gets more than the other in that
yeah,
comparison. But I saw all the stats that the most expected EPA whatever lost to drop passes. Trevor Lawrence leads the league. I saw he has not
yeah,
had the most help. He's not
yeah,
had a great GM there for a while. I see all of that, but the highs that Jordan Love reached in the second half
yeah.
of last season, Trevor Lawrence has never reached. And so
He hasn't.
I think
Now
that's where
Jordan
you
Love is a
start
lot
the
better
negotiation.
team, though. I
I
would say.
agree. I
And it's
agree.
more stability. And Trevor
I
Lawrence
agree.
was like beat up last year for about 2 months.
I
To
agree.
his credit, he was really beat up and played through it.
The throws that Jordan Love makes, especially that playoff game, astounding. Like
Yeah,
graduate level stuff. And so
yeah.
that's what I'm if I'm Jordan Love and David Mulligetta, is he Mulligetta? I'm walking in there. Yeah.
Andrew Kessler and David
Yeah.
Milligetta. Yeah,
And I'm walking in there and I'm showing him those throws. And I'm showing him the throw that Matt LaFleur talked about in the show with to Wicks, where it basically changed all the pressure, could handle
yeah.
everything. Like I just don't think it's possible. I've seen very few guys reach those highs and not have successful NFL careers.
Right.
So that's and because of the way they listen, everybody. By the way, everybody loves best player available until they actually see it, and that includes having to sign a guy to a $50 million a year deal after
Right.
after he 10 great games. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. Non-quarterback contract situation we should be keeping an eye on for whatever reason.
Well, Kevin, I have my mastered list here.
Oh, baby!
I'm gonna look at it. Of course, I can't bring it up. But I
Oh,
mean, the
classic.
receivers you got Brandon Aiyuk
Yeah.
is tenuous at best. I would say.
Wait, let's stop there. What's happening there? Like I don't believe the TikTok thing, Instagram my thing with Jaden Daniels. That's just an advanced
Yeah,
level version of what they used to do where they unfollowed teams on
yeah,
Instagram. Nobody buys that anymore. So now you're calling your old college teammate and say they don't want me
right.
anymore. I don't buy any of that stuff. I do
Yeah,
not buy for a second the 49ers were like, we don't want, you know what, just stay home, best receiver,
right.
at multiple metrics in football. Just stay home. So what I cannot get a read on this.
Yeah, so the read is they have tried to sign him. They have made offers to sign him. They have made efforts. the efforts are not maybe meeting the market that Ayuk believes he's in. And it's complicated because he is a top 10 receiver now. He's worked his way into that pretty
Top
solidly, I would
five
say,
in some cases,
from people
some
I've talked to
metrics.
around the league. I wouldn't go that far, but I just
Uh,
he's looked at as well. You could argue that, but he's looked
yeah.
at as that stratosphere now. He's not a fringe guy anymore. So if you're him, you're saying, well, Amon Ra Brown, St. Brown in Detroit got a new deal. What is it? 4 years, $120
Mm-hmm.
million. So there you go. There's my market. Or at least maybe he wants to meet or get close or surpass certain metrics of that contract, right? Because you need, as a player, you need a win. The team needs a win too. So his win is probably, can I beat Amon Ra in some areas, or one area or two areas, whatever it is, right? And San Fran, just to my understanding, has not been willing to do that. So it's just at a classic impasse, and they got to figure it out. They did Debo 2 years ago. I believe it
Mm-hmm.
was like late July or around training
Mm-hmm.
camp. So I think that could very well heat up. But they had some trade opportunities around the draft, and I think there are other teams that are willing to pay him what he wants. I do believe that. So maybe not for a first round pick in a trade, but I think they would do it under certain circumstances. So the Niners got a lot to shake out. And look, they got Trent Williams got 3 years left on his deal. He's not the highest paid left tackle anymore. I know he's 35, but he's by far the best still, or considered the best from most people I talk to. So it's like, do you have to handle him?
Mm-hmm.
You just paid McCaffrey, George Kittle. I bet if he wasn't hurt and didn't have surgery this offseason on his core muscle area, then he'd be asking for a new contract. Like that, these are champagne problems, but it's a team that has to pay a lot of people, and they got to figure out how they want to prioritize.
Question about spending. So we knew pretty reliably that their cap was going to go up about $10 million a year from 2013 basically until COVID, 2012 basically until
Yeah.
COVID. And I'm a little more unclear on the spikes. Did you spill water all over
Yeah,
yourself?
you can just edit that out. I
No,
literally
we're
opened
going
the
to put it in
wrong
the
part of my
front.
lighting.
I spilled tea on myself during Around the Horn last week,
I just spilled
and
about
Tony
8 ounces
Reale
of
played
water
that
on myself.
into a spill the tea joke.
Wow. Okay.
Reale's okay. And any improvement you see coming on your ability to drink water? Is that on the horizon?
That was pretty bad. I'm trying
Um,
to multitask here. I was so locked
so
in
you're so
with that.
locked into your master list of contract situations. Um, A, how are teams sort of reckoning with what this cap spike is going to look like? Do we have a dollar figure on what the kind of reliable spike is going to be, or are we just going to know that year after year? And let's
Ooh.
just start there.
Yeah, so I mean, there's certainly expected to be a lot of growth in the next few years. I don't have any
Yeah.
hard numbers
Yeah. I think
yet,
it's
but
hard.
there.
It was way more than they thought last year. So I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
just I think to
teams
wait and
are
see.
like, there is a real concern about the quarterback money for sure. Like Buffalo just dealt with it, and Josh Allen doesn't even make the money that
Right.
these $50 million
Right.
guys make. He's in the sort of the mid 40s range, but the last few years of the deal, those cap hits are so big that Buffalo had to shed $50 million in like sort of dead money or bloated contracts. Like they had to get to work in March. Now, some of that's always been uh, the process for teams, and they cut good players when they get bloated salaries. But it does seem a little more raw now with these teams trying to deal with this and get under the cap if they have that top 10 quarterback that they're paying. It's just, and now you have Justin Jefferson making $35 million a
Yeah.
year. Like,
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like,
yeah,
where does the spending go from here? Like, where quarterbacks we know it's going to go up, 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 up. But like, I remember was it Antonio Brown maybe
yeah,
took a deal that didn't move the market enough, and the wide receivers were stuck there for a while. That was when he was with
yeah.
Pittsburgh. Gronk, I think, similar situation with New England in the middle half of last decade. So it's all dependent on who breaks the barriers. That's why we're talking about Dak Prescott potentially moving
Right.
everything. But like, is there a position group where people are saying, all right, this is going to explode, or we're gonna shy away from spending here, just league wide, Jeremy?
Yeah, I do think it's a case by case basis with the wide receivers, but that's still the most controversial position because it clearly didn't go the way of the running backs, right? These guys are getting seriously
No.
paid. But the 49ers are that great case study where you have a really good, but maybe not like top of the top receiver, right? Like Justin Jefferson's sort of a no brainer, best at his position. Jamar Chase in Cincinnati will probably be the same thing. Some think he's the best. But if you have a guy who's not clearly in the top five or maybe in that top three, do you pay him $30 million a year? Teams I think are really coming to grips with that. I actually talked to a few people about this
Mhm.
week with some other teams just about roster construction. They mentioned like they're surprised more teams just don't go all in more on offensive line
Mm-hmm.
instead of paying these receivers, because Kansas City had wide receiver problems for 2 years. Now, granted, they had a quarterback that can make that work, but they also have the best interior offensive line in football. So it's like, Philadelphia, same thing. I know they paid these receivers, but they've paid they've really allocated a lot of their resources last decade to offensive line. Indianapolis, like they were able to get away with. They really haven't had a quarterback in a long time, but they've stayed afloat because they have a good line that they paid for. So I still think that will be the position that's probably still underpaid a little bit.
Mm.
You have these great tackles and some really good guards that are in that $20 million range, where you have receivers making 40% more than that. I think that will correct at some point on offense. The teams will pay more for that.
Hmm.
That's the position I kind of highlighted it's just always important, and it's more important than ever.
I would just, this is barely hyperbole. Quarterbacks and offensive and defensive line, they
Yeah.
just draft them and sign them until you figure it out.
Yeah.
Everything else is secondary. Everything else is a tiebreaker to me.
Yeah. I agree.
Wait, I need to go back to something you said earlier when you talked about a cap for one player. I never really got a read on how serious that was. Like, owners really wanted a cap on quarterbacks, and just because it was just getting so it was exploding so much, and NFL owners hate exploding salaries.
Yeah, so I remember around the CBA, I was covering the Steelers at the time. I remember hearing from a couple players in the locker room, including a player rep, that like the owners wanted that. They wanted the ability to allocate, just to have a separate cap for one player, almost like a supermax deal,
Mm.
that you could manage the rest of your cap for the other 10 positions. Um, and then you would have that one player you could designate as separate that doesn't affect the rest of your cap. So clearly, it would help the teams that, like Buffalo, I mentioned, or some of these teams that are dealing with the cap crunch, Dallas. It would just help you manage that a little better. But I just don't think the players went for it. So I don't really think it went anywhere. But it
Yeah.
was something that the owners were interested in, and it was a concession that they at some point asked for. I know that, and it just
If
didn't
you
get anywhere
think,
with the players. I think the players were concerned about either their veterans getting squeezed out or
yep,
certain positions being compromised.
yeah, or I mean, there's all sorts of unintended consequences there. Um, One is that there weren't enough concessions because then maybe you do that, but then get rid of the franchise tag. Something like that
Yeah,
would be a huge
yeah,
give back, which the NFL owners would never entertain. If you think quarterback contract takes are toxic now, imagine if there was a super max and it was either like a yes, no, pass, fail kind of thing.
right,
That would get us through some lean months of NFL content, which is what
right.
we're in right
Because yeah,
now.
if you have a good starter and you don't designate him as your
Oh
supermax
boy.
guy, then could you
Oh
imagine the
boy.
issues you have in your locker room?
Oh boy. I'll tell you who, I mean, let me tell you something. Jerry and Stephen Jones just staring at that Supermax button and saying, yeah, we'll wait on Dak. We'll wait on Dak. It'll be fine. We don't need to do it.
But
Jeremy
I don't know if it
Fowler.
would have been
Oh,
set like the NBA is, where you can only
yeah.
pay a certain threshold. It might have been the same structure
Well,
with
the NBA is based
this
on like all pros and
yeah,
bird, all sorts of wild stuff that, frankly, I don't. I just follow on Twitter the guys who are really into the NBA cap. It seems so foreign to me. I'm so glad. Honestly, I'm so
yeah,
glad we have the NFL cap, so I can at least understand this stuff and know where everything is coming from, understanding the accounting part of it. So,
right. And the
man,
NFL hates to imitate the NBA. Like they wouldn't want the NBA model. They would just want to get the quarterback money
they
off
would
the norm.
never call it a super max.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
Jeremy Fowler, thanks so much. Hopefully, we'll do NFL live sometime soon, pal.
No doubt. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me.